Okay, thank you, Jasmine. Okay, so welcome everyone to this little presentation on the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, hosted by A-STEP. My name is Nate Williams. I'm the secretary of A-STEP. I'm also a first-year PhD student in biochem and biophys at Texas A&M. And if this is your first time joining an A-STEP meeting or event, thank you for joining us, first of all. And also wanted to say A-STEP stands for Aggies in Science, Technology, Engineering Policy. And so A-STEP is all about trying to inform students about different career and internship opportunities and how to get involved in science policy. So we always try to host events that help to educate students on science policy careers, and we also try to get involved in the local community with science policy and science literacy and education. So as I said, I am the secretary, and we also have Jasmine here, who is the president of A-STEP, and we have Brooke Smith, the vice president, and we have a few others, but I think they couldn't join us today. So if you are interested in coming to future A-STEP events, just put your email in the chat and we can add you to our list. There's no membership requirements like a fee or trying to make a certain number of meetings or anything. It's really just if you want to learn about science policy more, you can just join in. Okay, so that's enough about A-STEP. So today we are joined by some folks from the GAO, the Government Accountability Office. And of course, I'm sure they'll explain a lot about what the GAO does. But I thought I would just introduce the GAO by saying they're an extremely important part of our government. And I think for the past almost exactly 100 years, they've grown this reputation of kind of fact-checking and auditing the US government. Well, it's more than a reputation, it's literally what they do. They've become known as the congressional watchdog of the US. So, of course, trying to learn about science policy careers, the GAO is an extremely important organization for that. So I think I want to thank Chi and the others for joining us today. And I just want to say it's a huge honor to have you guys talk with us today. And yeah, this should be extremely valuable for the students. So Chi, I'll hand it off to you.
Awesome. Nate, thank you so much for the introduction and for the very nice words about GAO. And likewise, we're very lucky for you to be hosting us today and for us to be talking about GAO and some of the opportunities that we have for students to join the GAO. So share my screen first, and then all right. So we actually have a group of 4 Aggies here today to give this presentation. So we're going to just do a quick introduction. So I'll start with our most senior person on the line, and that's Tommy Berry.
Howdy and good afternoon. My name is Tommy Berry, proud member of the Fighting Aggie Class 97. I'm currently the assistant director in our Defense Capabilities Management team, and I oversee a number of teams that do work in our strategic warfare and intelligence body work. So looking at DoD, cyberspace, cybersecurity, electromagnetic spectrum, intel related activities, etc. I'm also a proud dad of an Aggie fish down there, class of 2025.
And howdy, my name is Chi Mai. I'm a class of 2009 and 2014, getting my bachelor's and doctorate degrees in aerospace engineering. I'm a senior aerospace engineer within our science, technology assessment and analytics team. And I've been working on basically any kind of space-related things, aerospace-related things, going from planes to air weapons to space vehicles. And I'll turn it over to Jordan.
Thanks, Chi. I'm Jordan Tibbetts. I graduated my undergrad in 2017. I'm from the Bush School in 2018. I work on our Defense Capabilities and Management team, and I've worked on kind of a broad range of defense issues from military housing to how the department is preparing for things like biological threats. I'll turn it over to Corey.
Thanks, Jordan. Howdy, everyone. My name is Corey Rincars. I also graduated from the Bush School in 2019, studying international affairs. I'm currently a PDP analyst, which is the Professional Development Program. It's a 2-year program, our main entry pipeline. And essentially, we'll go over it more later, but I basically rotate through 3 different teams at GAO, and I'm currently in the healthcare team.
And our last member is Peter Casey, class of 20, graduate for the Bush School, and he wasn't able to join us today, but he's also a PDP analyst, that entry-level program that Corey is talking about. And I think he's in his second rotation with the Natural Resources and Environment team. But he was a cybersecurity scholar while at the Bush School. And so here's just a quick agenda for today. So we're going to talk about what GAO is, and we're going to give you a kind of a list of all the Aggies who are actually at GAO making a difference. And then I'm going to discuss one of GAO's mission teams, the Science, Technology Assessment and Analytics team that I'm on. And then I'll turn it over to Tommy, who will discuss GAO's cybersecurity work to kind of give you a flavor of some of the portfolio, one of the portfolios that GAO has. And then Jordan's going to finish us off by what it's like to work at GAO and how to apply for one of our positions. So off to you, Corey.
Thanks, G. All right, so GAO is an independent, nonpartisan agency that works for Congress. In other words, we're a legislative branch federal agency, and how we support Congress is we provide them with timely information. We have a few of these words here that are kind of our key components of our work. We're objective, fact-based, nonpartisan, non-ideological, and balanced. Next slide. And so how we do that is we audit the various federal government agencies. Pretty much wherever federal dollars go, GAO can do audits there. And we determine whether federal funds are being spent efficiently and effectively. We don't, a lot of people, when you hear audit, you think financial audits, but we do a lot of programmatic audits here as well. So we're looking at government programs, looking at their objectives, and seeing how governments are meeting their objectives. And just basically essentially anything that Congress is interested in us looking at. So it's a lot more than just crunching the numbers. And most of our work ends up with a report where we make recommendations for ways to improve government services. And we also have a legal team that does various legal decisions and opinions. And yeah, I think it was mentioned in the intro on GAO that we are celebrating our 100th anniversary, which we're very proud of that. And these are just some images from some recent reports. And I think that'll be kind of a running theme of my overview is GAO really does work on just about everything that you could be interested in terms of government work, so especially science and technology issues. And yeah, so these are GAO's core values. Respected, treated fairly, valued. Yeah, this kind of goes into our key components of all our work here. And I think how people treat each other and work at the agency is definitely one of the best things I've experienced as working here. I've been at GAO about 1.5 years, and just how everyone treats you immediately when you come on, you're treated as an equal part of the team. You're given real responsibility and a chance to do meaningful contributions right away, even as an intern. And I think that's something that's reflected in GAO's core values, and I've seen it play out in my time with the agency. And some more about GAO in terms of people being happy to work here. We're consistently ranked as one of the best mid-sized agencies in the federal government. These are based off of surveys of federal employees, and we are consistently at the top there. We also have been ranked #1 for multiple years in diversity and inclusiveness for mid-sized agencies. So I think those are both like kind of key components, things that we're very proud of in terms of people being happy and having a great diverse workforce. And we have a quote here from our Comptroller General, who's the head of the agency. And he's just kind of talking like I did about how much pride we take in knowing that staff considers our agency to be top choice as a place to work. And where are we located? As we were saying before we started, we are teleworking a lot now, so people are kind of sprinkled throughout the nation, but we do have our headquarters located in Washington, D.C., but we also have 11 field office locations. Those are going to be those darker blue states, highlighting where those field offices are. And I'll get into the mission teams in the next slide, but essentially we have various mission teams that work with different federal agencies, and all of those are represented at headquarters, but based on location, you can be in a field office as well. So locations have various components of work depending on which federal agencies have presences in those areas. And we have about 3,000 employees across the agency. And yeah, so these are our 15 mission teams, and they are kind of broken up by which federal agency they work with. So I'm currently in the healthcare team, and we work a lot with CMS, Medicare, Medicaid. I'm currently on a job looking at TRICARE, which is the Department of Defense's health insurance. So it's not just CMS. We kind of anywhere that has healthcare related work, the healthcare team can work. And but that's kind of a general rule of thumb is the teams are kind of split up based on topic or the agency that they primarily work with. And every year we put out this little graphic here that's kind of our top line accomplishments for the year. You'll see in the bottom left there, we had 578 reports, and those are kind of the key things that happens out of every job is you have that written report. And in those reports, we often make recommendations. You'll see we had over 1,600 recommendations last year. And those recommendations implementing of those recommendations, that we had over $666.2 billion in financial benefits and basically in dollars saved for the federal government, which translates, if you look at our budget, to $158 return for each $1 of our budget, and that's over the last 5 years on average. So we like to say that we're a very good investment. There's a lot of money going out the door in the federal government, and we just do our best to make sure it's spent efficiently and effectively and improve government as best we can. And Aggies at GAO, we have a great presence already, and we're always looking to expand and bring more Aggies on. That's why we're here today. And you'll see we also have the different mission teams that current Aggies at GAO work at. We have a lot of people on our defense team, but we are scattered throughout the agency, and we don't have the positions of the people working on this list, but I can attest that it's from me, more entry side, all the way up to management positions. We are well represented throughout the agency. And I think that's something I definitely realized when I first came on, is being greeted by Aggies and having an immediate connection and resource as a new employee was extremely helpful.
Awesome. Thanks, Corey. So now I'm going to talk about one of the GAO's 15 mission teams that Corey mentioned. And so this one is the Science, Technology Assessment and Analytics team. And so I'm just going to give you a high-level overview of what we are. So again, we're one of GAO's 15 mission teams. So STAA for short, we actually became the 15th mission team as we became officially established in January 2019. And so we're less than 3 years old. And this was born out of a need that the Congress realized of having more science and technology expertise that is fair and balanced. They get lobbied every single day by interest groups and companies and other things, other people. And so they needed somebody to help filter that out. What's actually making sense, what is actually viable, and what could actually be, what's a worthy investment to be looking at. And so STAA was born out of partially out of that need. And so STAA as a team is composed equally of analysts and specialists. And our specialists include both scientists and engineers. So on the scientist side, we have occupations such as atmospheric scientists, biologists, chemists, physicists, geologists, ecologists, material scientists, and more recently, a lot of data scientists. On the engineer side, I'm an aerospace engineer. We also have electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, and systems engineers. And so, whatever topic of science or engineering or technology that you're working in, or even mathematics, there's a position that for you at GAO, because we need that kind of expertise. And so here on this chart, you see that STAA has 4 different groups. We have the evaluation side, the technology assessment, engineering sciences, and the innovation lab. And I'll go into a little bit of each of those in the next few slides. But what we like to say is that we are assisting the Congress with oversight, insight, and foresight. And that lines up with 3 of the 4 groups that you see here. And then our last one, our innovation lab, is kind of like a GAO-wide improvement activity that we're doing. So the first one I want to go over is the science and technology auditing. So this is the oversight function. So this is the oversight of the federal science and technology enterprise and any kind of S&T centric programs or projects. And so I've linked here some key reports that we've issued in the last few years. STAA has only been involved, existed for 3 years. And so this is all, fairly recent work that we've done. So this group within STAA works on the audit work. the performance audits that Corey mentioned. And these are kind of audits that come up with recommendations. So they mainly ask the question, how's the federal government as a whole managing the workforce, its technology implementations, for example, and then like for Operation Warp Speed, it's looking at both the science of developing the vaccines, but also the industry and the manufacturing capacity of actually getting those vaccines out to the public. And then we have other topics like facial recognition technology and then high performance computing that are government-wide topics of interest. Our second group is engineering sciences, and this is the insight portion. So this group gives us insight into emerging and priority issues. So one of the most recent reports that we issued was the AI accountability framework. So AI is becoming a big thing. It's being more pervasive. And so one of the things we have to do as an audit agency is to try to determine how is it that we are going to audit artificial intelligence? How should federal agencies consider developing AI? And so this report developed this framework by gathering experts and doing literature reviews to determine, what are some of the best practices on developing AI in the federal government. This group also issues a lot of our best practices guides. And so I listed the 4 here that we have. So we have agile assessment for software development, technology readiness assessment to determine, is a technology ready? Is it mature enough to be developed into a program and to be deployed into the field? And then on a corollary, cost estimating and schedule assessment. If you were to develop a technology into an actual component or a software, how is that program being managed to actually deliver the capabilities that an agency would want to do? And then our third group is the technology assessment group, and this is the group that I'm in. And this is the foresight function. So foresight on the consequences on the advances of science and technology. So oversight is looking at things that have already happened. Insight is looking at things that are going on right now. And then the foresight is looking ahead as to what kind of science and technology developments are happening and what do they mean for security, economics, privacy, and society as a whole. And so these technology assessments are not actually audits. They look at the technologies themselves and their externalities or their follow-on effects. And so these reports are actually issued with what we call policy options. So Corey had talked about audits, the audit reports giving recommendations on how to improve a particular federal program or an agency, whereas these policy options are a little more broader than that. When we mean policy options, we're thinking about a set of options or actions that a stakeholder can take. And these stakeholders aren't limited to just the Congress or the federal agencies. When we consider these policy options, we're also thinking about what industry can do and what academia can do to help solve some of the challenges of the implementation of these new technologies or their externalities, or if there's some benefit that could be gained from implementing the technology in a certain way, we want to address those as well. I also want to highlight here that in addition to the technology assessment reports, we also have a series of science and tech spotlights, which are just 2-pagers. And an example of one of those is on the right graphic. So this one's on blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. So these are just 2-pagers that look at the science of the technology. What is it? What do we know about it? How does it work? How mature is it? And what are some of the opportunities, challenges, and policy questions that come as a result of this development? And then our 4th group is the innovation lab. So this one's a little bit different than other groups, but the purpose of the innovation lab is to evaluate for GAO to evaluate other agencies' use of technologies such as cloud computing and big data and artificial intelligence. GAO has to be knowledgeable and familiar with that technology ourselves. And so the innovation lab was stood up to help us to do that, to gain that internal knowledge. It's also established to implement those same technologies to help improve GAO's own operations. So they're looking at how to incorporate data from various sources from various federal agencies and to synthesize it and analyze it in a way that's understandable to the public and also to our ultimate client, which is the Congress. And so that was a quick overview of STAA, and we can answer questions a little bit later on. But right now, I'll turn it over to Tommy to talk about our cybersecurity work.
Outstanding, thanks, Chi. So this gives us a chance to kind of just maybe do a little bit of a deeper dive on a topic. As she kind of highlighted it with STAA, there's all kinds of diversity of topics that at GAO we were able to hit upon. And cybersecurity is one that GAO's actually been hitting on for decades. I know it's something that seems to be cool now, seems to be the fad now in the last decade. But even before I became, started at GAO and I was down in Aggie land, GAO was doing cybersecurity related audits. And in fact, in 1997, proud member there, GAO actually elevated the topic of cybersecurity to what we call our high risk list. And this is a report we put out every 2 years that we say, Congress, these and federal agencies, these are the top issues you need to start paying attention to. And so back in 1997, the agency said this issue, cybersecurity, is very real and it needs to be looked at. And so again, it's a good example of like what STAA is doing. Is at the time we were doing oversight, but at the same time we started, raising the bell that this is something that needed to be done sooner versus later. Next slide. All right. So this is a kind of a snapshot of our most recent high risk report in the last year. And basically what we did here at GAO is we looked at all of our audits, all of our performance reviews to get a sense of what is it the federal government needs to do to get its hands around cybersecurity. And basically we did, and this was to help all federal agencies. It wasn't just to help Department of Homeland Security. It wasn't just to help FAA. It wasn't just to help DoD. But what does the entire government need to really start focusing on? And we developed this framework for them. As you can see, we categorized 10 key actions in 4 groups. The first group is composed of actions that need to be taken to basically establish a comprehensive wide cybersecurity strategy. And one of the things, as you can see in the first bucket there, was we called for basically the President of the United States to develop a national national cybersecurity strategy. And shortly after our report came out a few years back, President Trump and his administration did issue a national cybersecurity strategy. We had previously seen federal agencies issue their own cyberspace strategy, but as you guys can appreciate, cyberspace doesn't recognize federal jurisdictions. So, okay, this is a Department of Justice, this is Department of Defense. Our cyber actors cut across all, and so we needed a whole of government approach. One of the other things that we said is you really need to pay attention to your supply chain risk. And obviously we saw this come to pass recently in the last year with SolarWinds, and but also not just with software, being a threat, but also where we get our supply chain, our IT supply chain. As you may know, we rely extensively on countries like Taiwan for our semiconductors, and obviously the extent to which our education system, our healthcare, our economic system is reliant on IT systems that are relying on chips in very few locations, that has national security implications. So we told them they need to become aware of those kinds of issues. Obviously, workforce issues is always an issue when you're dealing with STEM related issues, as each of you can appreciate. And then of course, emerging technologies, whether it's AI or Internet of Things. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. The next kind of area focused on federal systems. And I think kind of the key things here is looking at federal response to cyber incidents. And I'll talk a little bit more on that in a minute. Really critical is protection of cyber critical infrastructure. That's the term critical infrastructure is a term that really kind of came to pass after 9/11 and then especially again after Hurricane Katrina in 2005, where we look at things like our financial systems, our dams, our water systems, our aviation systems. Who's there to protect them? And whether it's from a terrorist disaster or in the case of in cyberspace, malicious cyber actors. And we realize that the federal government needs to respect that most of our critical infrastructure is owned by private companies. But at the same time, they sometimes need assistance before the incident happens. And so we have to look at how we develop that relationship, or how they develop that relationship. And obviously something really critical to all of us is protecting our privacy and sensitive information, whether it's healthcare related information or our other information that we give to the government. Okay, next slide. This just is an example of the strategy that came out after our iHeartRisk report. One of the things that the GAO team did is we sent a team in. We looked at the national, after they issued it, we went and looked at the national cyber strategy. We looked at the implementation plan that the National Security Council put in place, get a better sense of who's responsible for what and whether or not there were seams or gaps that needed to be addressed. We made a recommendation in accordance with that. Next slide. Here's an example of a report one of my teams did on Internet of Things. We actually had a team, the predecessor to SCAA did a technical assessment on Internet of Things. In the meantime, Congress had a question about what does this mean to DoD, the Department of Defense, Internet of Things, and what security risks do smart devices and other sensors that are currently proliferating our military members or civilians. And one of the things that we highlight in this report are 4 different scenarios in which are concerns, and these same scenarios can apply not only within the Department of Defense, but any private sector entity, any nonprofit for some of these, and or in other federal agencies. So again, the first one is simply someone with a device, your phone, some other smart device can be used to basically access Bluetooth enabled or other enabled HVAC system and shut it off. And if you shut down the cooling system to a servers or a cloud farm, you basically have ceased the military operations, you ceased government operations, you cease the company's ability to operate. So it's basically an example of a backdoor that can come through a device. Another one is an example of looking at where you can sabotage equipment. In this case, it's obviously a military scenario. Somebody who's an insider goes into a dry dock. A dry dock is basically an area, a dock where we bring U.S. Navy ships in, we pump all the water out. All the dock workers can now go and work on the lower parts of the ship to do repairs and maintenance, etc. So somebody who's entered the dry dock, again, their sensor, their phone is used through a malicious cyber actor to open up the industrial control systems that had pumped all the water out, and all of a sudden that area can be flooded and kill hundreds, thousands, and do extreme damage to that ship. We talk about how also it reveals operational security, and it can be used for intelligence collection. As far as your phone talks, everything's beeps, and so it can reveal information that would otherwise be classified. And an example of that is if you look to the right, and it's interesting, the military didn't fully appreciate this when we were trying to explain this threat to them, and they candidly got kind of poo-pooed, if you will. But ironically, by the time our report was issued, an Australian student, a 20-year-old student, issued a report, and you can look up a Strava, S-T-R-A-V-A. And what he did is he took all of Strava's information publicly and filtered it out and was able to find secret U.S. bases, military bases, based on where service members who wear Fitbits and watches go running. So for example, what you're seeing here on the right is Bagram Air Base, an air base in Afghanistan where I had previously traveled. And service members tend to be healthy, so they run with their Fitbits. And here we've basically mapped out the base, the perimeter of the base, the primary roads. And again, Bagram Air Base was no secret other than maybe, what the roads look like, but otherwise, we did have bases in Africa and other places that were revealed because of these devices. And finally, we have where you can actually, do damage to a military leader, a government leader, a corporation CEO by taking over devices or finding out where they're locating and ambushing them. Okay, moving to the next slide. Another report we did was looking at weapon system cybersecurity. Our weapon systems, our aircraft are full of lots of computers, whether it's maintenance systems, communication systems, targeting systems, collision avoidance systems. And this isn't just weapon systems. Think about your, American airline flights, your Southwest Airlines flights, your Boeings. They all are composed. Obviously, they don't have weapon system databases, but a lot of these other systems, IT systems. And so if they're not protecting those systems and they're not building security into them, it poses risk to air traffic and economics. Okay, next. Speaking of which, how significant is this problem? Well, a report we issued a few years back to show how much coding really goes into everyday technology. Or the F-22, if you don't know, is one of the most advanced fighter jets in the world, if not the most advanced fighter jet in the world. And at the time when we did this report, Boeing was coming out with its Dreamliner They had all the bells and whistles for international flights. But when you look at it, it pales in comparison with all the millions of lines of code that our modern luxury vehicles have. And this report is already 5 years old. So you can imagine the lines of code have only gotten bigger. So we've got more lines of code software flowing through our vehicles than in the most advanced fighter jets. And so consequently, think about the risks that potentially poses to vehicles that you and I are driving or may be driving in the next few years, after you pay out those student loans, of course, right? All right. So finally, we talked about cyber incidents. And this is obviously an area that's really huge, where you look at OPM breach, Equifax breach. Most recently, we saw with SolarWinds. Here's a great example of SolarWinds, where the Russians were able to go find a company in Austin, Texas, that really was off most people's radar, planted a little bug in its system there, and because it had poor cyber hygiene, it's purportedly, they were able to put that bug in, and it basically just spread to lots of corporations, nonprofits, and U.S. government agencies. And the big thing on Colonial is it was a watershed moment, I think, nationally for ransomware. Ransomware has been an area that has unfortunately crippled and destabilized many small businesses across the United States. It has crippled and destabilized cities and school districts. And so I think if there's a good news story of Colonial Pipeline is that there's a realization this is a real threat, and we've got to make ourselves more resilient, because it's not a matter of if somebody will be attacked by cyber incidents, it's only a matter of when. And I know that A&M is having to deal with that same resiliency issue. Next.
All right, thanks, Tommy. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about just generally what it's like to work at GAO and some tips on how to apply. So as we kind of touched on the front end of this conversation, working through COVID, GAO has demonstrated immense flexibility, as well as really taking care of its people. Since the start of COVID in March, we've been predominantly teleworking. We're now in a voluntary re-entry position. Most of us are still working at home, with the exception of classified work. In addition, we have over 50 active engagements working on COVID-related reports, in addition to other health and life sciences work. We also issue quarterly reports on the CARES Act. These reports have included over 88 recommendations and 4 congressional matters. So we're really active in the oversight of the federal government's response to COVID-19. Next slide. So another really key thing about working at GAO is the work-life balance. Some things I really want to highlight on this slide is telework flexibilities. As we talked about, we're in full telework right now, but even prior to COVID-19, a lot of folks teleworked for the majority of the time. So that's really nice flexibility, as well as flexibility in hours and schedules, generous leave, including parental. Another thing I want to highlight on this slide is the education and support. In addition to getting to learn about really interesting and key issues through our audit work, we also have a lot of opportunities for training. For example, the defense team this year brought in a number of speakers to educate our workforce on key national security issues. There's opportunities for staff to go to paid courses on various topics, master's degrees, leadership courses, a number of things. So that's a really nice aspect of working here, is not only are you growing in your professional audit work, but also GAO really invests in its people's professional development. So another thing I want to highlight on here is the compensation. Going into talking a little bit about the internship and PDP program. Our internship is paid, and it's paid at the appropriate GS scale, which is really nice. I remember looking for internships when I was in grad school, and that's not always the case. So that's great flexibility. You can actually it's livable wage. And transitioning into the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about our professional development program. So, Chi, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So our entry-level professional development program, the main way we hire through that is through the paid student internship program, which lasts about 10 to 16 weeks. We hire through other means as well. For example, Chi came in at a more senior position due to his expertise. But this paid student internship program is a key way in which we hire folks. And after the student internship program, based on performance and budget availability, there is the opportunity to have non-competitive conversion to our professional development program. And our professional development program is 2 years long. You have the opportunity to rotate through various mission teams, which we covered earlier. Those are the teams that focus on different federal agencies and different topics that the federal government covers. So you get to kind of figure out which areas of GAO that you enjoy working in, as well as really strong on-the-job training, both formal and on the job. So you get out of that 2-year program really prepared to hit the ground running as an analyst, and they really set you up for success through that. We are on the band system, as you can see there in the middle column, and those are the bulleted list of our positions, and then on the far right hand is our senior executive service positions. Go to the next slide, Chi. So another thing I want to highlight about the internship as well as the PDP program, you do real work as an intern at GAO, as well as the PDP program. You are expected to operate as an analyst. You would be conducting and documenting interviews, reviewing federal documentation, applying and analyzing federal best practices against the program or process that you're evaluating, doing analysis on qualitative and quantitative data, developing audit plans, scope and methodologies of how we're going to answer the questions that Congress has asked us to look into, as well as attending meetings with Hill staff. Oftentimes we're asked to testify in front of Congress. So you also participate in supporting our senior executive service members who go testify on the Hill. There's also opportunities to travel and meet with agency officials and get to do some of that work on site as well. To the next slide. So what we're looking for in a GAO analyst. So as Chi alluded to and Corey, GAO looks at everything that the federal government executive branch touches. So we have a number of expertise and focus areas. So we really, if I could boil it down to 3 basic skills, we really are looking for folks that are good analytical thinkers, strong oral and written communication, and work well with others. Some other things I want to highlight on this slide is high attention to detail, ability to collaborate effectively with people from diverse backgrounds and all levels of the agency. We work with a number of different federal partners. So that ability to work well with others is really key at GAO. US citizenship based on just the nature of our work. Ability to quickly absorb and incorporate new and complex material. We're often asked to get up to speed quickly on typically highly complex topics. So that ability and interest in learning and gathering complex material quickly is key as well. Go to the next slide, Chi. Thank you. So this is a screenshot of a past GAO application for our internship. And I just want to give you guys some quick tips on how to apply if you're interested in our internship announcement. And I'll get to some of the dates and timings of that in a second. But some things I want to highlight on this slide is, first off, paying attention to the entire application announcement on USA Jobs. USA Jobs is where you'll find our announcements for our jobs. So this slide is highlighting the key responsibilities. And something I would advise you to do, we've gone through and highlighted keywords. So pulling out, looking at what are these key responsibilities and pulling that out and highlighting that in your resume and your essays and your interview if you get to that point in the process. So for example, planning is a really big part of our work, planning the audit, planning the methodology, how you're going to answer your research objectives. So highlighting examples of times that you've done that, research projects at school are great examples, different work experience, highlighting strong communication skills, the, written products. Another thing I really want to highlight with these areas is the impact of your work. So if you're highlighting a written product that you did, what was that impact? I was able to effectively communicate this to my professor, or this end goal that happened, if you're using a career experience example. On the left-hand column are some keywords that are specific to the GAO announcement that I really want to highlight. So, your research and analysis skills, communication, and core and people values are key there. Going to the next slide. Just some more application tips. I would get, if you're not familiar with the federal resume, I would get started on that. I would also recommend tailoring that to the specific job announcement. When these announcements come out, sometimes they close quickly or have a number limit. So you really want to have those materials prepared. We obviously write reports for Congress, and so strong writing is key. So you want to make sure you don't have any spelling errors. I mean, that's known for all job applications, but you want to make sure that you invest sufficient time in completing that, because they are a little bit longer than your typical interview or resume for private sector jobs. So just paying attention to that and getting a head start on that is something I'd really recommend. And just remember that, we are interested in you and want you to succeed. So playing up your strengths in that paperwork is key. Next slide, Chi. So our internship announcement should come out shortly, early December, and we can try and push that announcement to your leadership at ASTEP just to flag that for folks that are interested. And we'll go live on USA Jobs. There's a way to set reminders that notify you when jobs are announced. So I would really recommend that, because as I mentioned earlier, sometimes there's an application limit and they usually close pretty quickly. And I know it's a kind of busy time of year for you guys with coming out in early December. I want to highlight that. And then interviews, if selected, would be from mid-February to March, with onboarding in late May. We still aren't sure if it would be telework or in person. I would guess teleworking at this point in our operating status, but we are not confirmed on that. Go to the next slide, Chi. Thank you. Another thing we want to highlight before we jump into questions is on December 1st, we have a diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility presentation that's highlighting work that we've done at GAO, as well as how we prioritize DE&I in our workforce. I really encourage you, if you want to hear more about who GAO is, how we set the standard for DE&I in our workforce, as well as how we help hold other federal agencies to best practices in this area. You'll hear from our Comptroller General in that presentation, as well as others who have chosen to work at GAO because of our highlight of diverse backgrounds and their experiences in working and applying that at GAO, and as well as in their reviews of other federal agencies. In addition, that presentation will include some intern application processes, tips, and preparation for the summer internship announcement. So would really recommend that you check that out if you're interested. So with that, I will pause and see if anyone has any questions for any of the presenters today.
Okay, I have some questions myself, but I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation. That was pretty great. I was getting giddy at some points because it sounds pretty fun what you guys do. So I don't know if anyone has questions, you could speak up or you could throw it in chat if you prefer that. I have like 5 or 6, but see, we got one from Ashley Tucker, and anyone could answer this. So Ashley said, could you elaborate more on the healthcare oversight that your organization does? through the one mission team for healthcare?
Sure. Yeah, I can take that since I'm the representative from the healthcare team. So I've only been in the healthcare team a few months, and I'm working with TRICARE, which is DoD, as I mentioned before. But yes, we do a lot of Medicare, Medicaid work. We also are doing a lot on the CARES Act for COVID funds as well. And so it can be anything from looking at various parts of Medicare and Medicaid and seeing how they're distributed and what the policies are. To really any other kind of healthcare work. I don't know if you had a specific interest in healthcare that I could look into, but let me know.
Yeah, I'll add on to Corey. So the SWA team looks at healthcare related technologies. And so we had a series of reports looking at AI in various parts of healthcare. So AI in healthcare, AI medical services, AI and drug development. So those tech assessments have all been released. You can find them on our website. We also recently just released a report on the technologies for vaccine development. So not specifically for COVID, but just in general, what technologies are available for the US and the world to develop new vaccines in response to emerging infectious diseases. So if you're looking for more of the tech side of healthcare, we also do that work as well.
Okay, that was good to know. Okay, so we got some other questions coming out. So we got one from Kaya Mukherjee. She said, do you have any ongoing work in food and agriculture areas?
So I guess I'll take the stab at that one because I don't think we have anybody from. We do a lot of work on it. In fact, we have a mission team called Natural Resources and Environment, also known as NRE. We like to use acronyms like everyone else in the government. So our Natural Resources and Environment team takes on a body of work looking at USDA issues, as well as USDA is agriculture. Sorry, issues dealing with Department of Energy, et cetera. So some of the things that come to my head real quick are like dealing with imported food security issues. I know a report that we did out of Dallas a number of years ago. In fact, we had an intern working on was the issue of slaughterhouse sanitation issues and practices and the extent to which there's oversight in those, as you can imagine, E. coli or other bad cow disease breakouts and what kind of compliance requirements and really interesting things. As you do this work, you discover that in some cases there is no oversight. It's just a supervisor that through a prior agreement that exists and so it's really fascinating. But yeah, we do a lot of work looking at that. We obviously a lot of work looking at our own internal agricultural issues. Whether it's crop subsidies, et cetera. So a lot of work. I would recommend if you really want to get a sense for that type of work, there's a site gao.gov/topics. In fact, I'll just put it in the chat box, but you can get a good list of work under this area. But definitely, basically anywhere your tax dollars goes, GAO is there.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It seems GAO is just involved in everything. I mean,
that's one of the neat things about real quick, Corey, like the program, the entry level program that Corey's in is, as he indicated at the very beginning, is for the first 2 years of your career, you get to rotate between 3 different mission teams. So you can get a taste or a sense of the type of work, the diversity of work we do. And, you may want to come and say, oh, I want to do agriculture, but also you find, you want to do something dealing with Bureau of Indian Affairs or something else. So it gives you a chance to see something you maybe weren't previously exposed to. And then at the end of that 2 years, you get to commit to one of those mission teams.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. So another question from Rachel King. Could you provide some information on what the Natural Resources and Environment team would typically work on?
I would just, yeah.
Right.
I would say just go to the graphic I just sent just now. And the other one you could go to, and I'll put another one there about NRE. I'll put that link in there also.
Yeah, some things that they do work on just real quickly is air and water quality. Tommy already mentioned the food. They look at sources of energy, and also the Department of Energy oversees the nation's nuclear weapons, and so NRE also has some work in nuclear weapons.
Okay, interesting. So another question on the healthcare side, maybe a question for Corey. From Martin Nunez, are psychological services discussed in the healthcare team?
Yeah, that's definitely a major component of a lot of our work. I'm actually working on a job right now that is looking at psychological services for women in the pregnancy and postpartum periods. But there's also a lot of work, especially for DoD, the Department of Defense, related to service member suicides, things like that. But I think there is a pretty well-established lack of behavioral health care providers in the country. And so there's a lot of congressional interest in that topic kind of throughout various forms of healthcare. So that's definitely a key component of our work.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So a question from Jonathan Picker in chat. He said he's going to finish his PhD before May. So should he apply for the student internship? Like, would he be able to, or should he just go straight for the PDP role?
Let me take that one, Chi.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So that's a tough one. So let me answer it this way. The student program is only available for those who are students during the course of the internship. That's point number one. Point number two is because of the success of our internship program, bragging here about the intern program, we don't always open up a PDP entry level position. One year we could have it, another year we may not, because we just got so many successful, great interns and they all want to come on board and we want to offer them jobs. So the thing I would offer is, if there's a way you could postpone your PhD graduation to August, then you can apply for the internship as long as you're still enrolled in school during the summer. The challenge with that approach, though, so that gives you an approach if you want to consider GAO. That would be good news. The bad news, first of all, is you're not guaranteed an internship at GAO, right? You got to still go through the process, number one. The other thing is you could graduate in August, but we're not going to be able to probably most likely offer you a job on August 1st. Just, that's just, we don't move that fast. So you are potentially taking a risk on having several months. If you were to get offered a position, it may take several months before that were to happen. So the only time I really say it's definitely something to consider is if you're looking at graduating and you can take a class in the fall that maybe would be helpful to your career, then that gives you time to do your internship, complete your one class or so, but I know A&M fees are pretty high, so it may not be worth it, but that at least then positions you to then get an offer some point between that August to December graduation date. So it's tough. You can keep your eye out, but I have to be honest with you, we don't always have a PDP announcement every year.
And I'll speak from the STAA side. As a new team and we were growing, we did hire, I think, probably 20 to 30 like entry-level PDP types. I mean, it may not that entirely, all that number is entirely PDP, but a good number of them. But this was a growth year for us. Going to FY22, it just kind of depends on what the budget is, what kind of funds Congress allocates as to what our staffing levels will look like. As Tom mentioned, as to whether we have PDP positions open any given year.
The one last thing, if I can add, is I would definitely, and Jordan, I think, hit on this, is set up a usajobs.gov account and save a search for GAO. And that way, if you do graduate with PhD and go somewhere else, but then a year later you see a GAO announcement come out, you can then apply through that position. And we do hire people, mid-career, end of career, early career, so you don't have to be coming right out of college.
Okay, yeah, all good points. So I do want to wrap it up pretty soon, but we had two more questions. From Mia March, she said, are there data analyst and science internships within GAO?
Unequivocally, yes. We are hiring a lot of data analysts right now, and within the STAA for Innovation Lab, a lot of in the science internships. I think our team had at least 10, I think, internships, for our STAA. And I don't want to mean to speak for STAA only. There are science positions and other teams at GAO as well.
Okay, and then one last question from Caleb Elizondo. So would you say that most of your undergraduate interns are upperclassmen? So I guess he means, like, are they, juniors and seniors, or, well, I guess it'd be sophomores and juniors. Are you able to take freshmen, do you think? Or is that pretty rare?
I wouldn't say it's rare. It does happen. I've only been in the agency for 2 years. So I can't say much to Tommy would know, statistically.
Yeah, I'd say
on average.
statistically, it would be more of the latter, in part just because unless they had a prior work experience, like let's say they're in the military or Peace Corps, something before, because as that you submit your application, and Jordan kind of walked through, you have to show, have you had planning experience, have you had communication skills, and so as you can imagine, students who are juniors or seniors who have some work experience, whether it's a student aid position or student government position like A-STEP or something, you're able to do it. So it's building that resume your first 2 years gives you a chance to, if you will, help you in the scoring, if you will. But it can happen, and we do, like I said, we've had people leave the military and come, and they've got a breadth of experience, but they're only a freshman, if you will.
Yeah, and before we close up, I want to note, Jordan mentioned when those positions come open on USA Jobs. So one, set an alert for them, but two, the reason you want to set up an alert for them is that sometimes there are limited numbers of applications before the posting will close. And so our internship positions, there'll be 2 of them, one for undergraduates and one for graduates. I think each of them will be limited to 500 applications each. So 500 applications for undergraduates, 500 for graduates. And from what I saw in the last 2 years, the graduate one closes very quickly, like within 2 weeks of it going online. So usually they post it for about a month, but I think they get about 500 within the first 2 weeks. The undergraduate one is a little bit longer, but don't rush your laurels.
Right. I had a few small questions. Do you need to be a U.S. citizen to do the internship? I know you need it for the PDP, so you need it for both, right? Okay.
Yes.
Just checking. And I had a very small, easy question. Does GAO hire graphic designers for all the graphics? Because you guys make graphics constantly, right? So is it something everybody tries to improve at, or is it just you hire certain people?
Yeah, we have dedicated visual communication analysts. So we actually have dedicated communication analysts to help us with the report language itself, but also a dedicated what we call a VCA, visual communication analyst, to develop the graphics for us.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it makes sense because I saw a lot of good graphics in the slides. Okay, well, I think we'll wrap it up there. And I thought that was an awesome presentation. So thank you for proposing this idea, because I think learning about GAO was just amazing. So I think I'll be trying for the internship, but I am in my first year for the PhD, so we'll see. But yeah, thanks again for presenting.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks again for having us. It's, very enjoyable for us to meet all of you virtually, and hopefully we'll see your applications come through.
Good luck with finals, all.
Thanks, everyone.
Get the hell out of finals.
Thank you.